So thanks for joining us here today. We've got the two people behind the Judge Dredd Uprising experience, soon to open in London. That's Tom Lionetti-Maguire, the CEO of Little Lion Entertainment, and Jason Kingsley, OBE, who is the CEO of Rebellion. So good to see you both, guys.
Hi.
Hi there. Hi, Charles. Thanks for having us.
I thought it'd be good initially just to start off, Tom, you first. Just give us a bit of a background about Little Lion.
Yeah, sure. So Little Lion is the company that I started in 2015. And we are an immersive theatre company, but we create theatrical, immersive, generally IP-led attractions. And our real sort of MO is that we make the audience the center of the action, and we make them the star of the show. So it's really about sort of putting primacy on the experience and creating sets and worlds that are rich and beautiful, but also really creating something that's exciting, engaging, entertaining, and as I say, puts the audience in the heart of the action and makes them the star of the show.
So just tell us briefly about Crystal Maze. That's been a successful production for you.
Yes, so the Crystal Maze was our first range of shows, and we now have a theatre on Shaftesbury Avenue, down by Piccadilly Circus, which is our sort of main flagship, and we have another theatre in central Manchester in Old Granada Studios, which is the longest running theatrical production in Manchester, which we're also very proud of. And what we've been building towards for some time now is a large, both domestic and international expansion, and an announcement of a whole new range and a whole new gamut of shows. The first one being Judge Dredd Uprising, that we're incredibly excited about, and you know, it's just kind of a dream come true to do the deal with Jason and to bring this show to life, and it's the first in our new range of shows, which is incredibly exciting for us.
Fantastic. And Jason, I know this is Rebellion's first foray into location-based entertainment. So if you give us a bit of a background about the company. I know it's the UK's biggest independent game developer. So yeah, do tell us more.
Yeah, well, where to start? Well, quite a few, nearly 3 decades ago, my brother and I decided we ought to start making computer games, which is what we did. So we fast forward to now, we are one of the world's biggest independent and privately owned games makers. We make computer games, but we also publish 2000 AD and lots of graphic novels and the Judge Dredd magazine, which is having its 30th anniversary right around now. And we are really interested in heritage. So we think of pop culture as a really important component of what makes us who we are as a society. And often the sort of more commercial side of heritage is sort of dismissed a little bit. And I'm particularly interested in live action stuff and historical stuff, and the combination of having something like Judge Dredd, which is a fully realized, albeit imaginary, or these days you could argue it's not actually that imaginary. It's the world is going in that direction anyway, so maybe it's just fortune telling. But you know, having something like that people can immerse themselves in fully is really key for me. I love books, and you can immerse yourself fully in a book, but you've got to read it. And, you know, I love film and TV, but again, they're all different experiences. Games require interactivity, but this is sort of going one notch further, which is you actually have to be there. And that's kind of exciting and challenging and interesting. And from a games design perspective, I'm particularly interested in working with Little Lion because they are such experts in dealing with the public and in sort of real situations, and that's a whole area of expertise that I'm fairly unfamiliar with. So it's been brilliant to work with them and see what they're doing and how they do it.
Good stuff. So I thought we're going to be talking about the new experience, the Judge Dredd experience coming to London. I thought for those of you who are not familiar with Judge Dredd, I thought I'd give you a very brief introduction. Jason, jump in if anything I say is wrong. Wikipedia tells us Judge Dredd is a comic book franchise based on the longest running comic strip in 2000 AD, started in 1977, which comes out, it's a comic with lots of different strips in there. He's a law enforcement officer in a dystopian future city, Mega City 1, which covers most of the east coast of North America, and he is a street judge empowered to summarily arrest, convict, sentence, and execute criminals. So I should confess here, Jason, I've been reading 2000 AD since it started. Behind a garage in Oldham in the north, there is a spinner that I lost on the first my first issue, and from when Judge Dredd started in the second issue, I've been a big fan, and I think along with Flesh and Strontium Dog, those are my three favorites. So I thought for our viewers, I'd share a strip I found. You mentioned, Jason, about fortune telling. I think the writing in Dredd has always been what sets it apart, although the art was fantastic. And I found, I'm going to screen share for a moment and show you this strip from one of my annuals I found from 1993. This shows a scene in Mega City 1 where there's a plague all over the city. Everyone's got fleas, everyone's scratching. The scratching is absolutely infernally awful. And you can see here, there's a guy who found it so difficult, he's actually jumping down a meat grinder or garbage grinder. And so there's another guy who shoots himself in the head. The scratching is so impossible and infernal. And you can see here, the Dredd's arresting a guy, and the guy says to him, "How come you ain't got fleas, Judge Dredd?" And he says, "I've got them, I'm just not scratching."
there are classic lines like that throughout the long history of Judge Dredd, and it's I mean, Mega City 1 is really a parody of modern society, or should be taken as a parody of modern society. And it has things like, you know, smoking is illegal in any building apart from a specific building called a smokatorium, which you're allowed in. But it's very dangerous to smoke outside, and you'll probably get arrested and locked up for many years, if not outright executed. But it's still permitted, but you have to go into the smokatorium. But they also have walk-in euthanasia as well. So you could just decide, we're walking along the road and you can decide you want to end it, and your relatives will get a cash payment for you doing that. I mean, and so you know, we take aspects of the writers take aspects of the modern world and sort of tweak them further to the absurd. But unfortunately, it appears that the real world is kind of not far behind. You know, what was absurd 20 years ago is just par for the course now. Yeah, so it's pretty scary actually, sometimes looking back over 2000 AD and seeing this authoritarian chaos, but he's barely in control, and suddenly realizing, actually, that's now, that is.
Yeah, I saw a picture the other week. I think it was in Portland, and it was from this. I'm not even sure it was a police officer. It was some law enforcement person who had no ID on and a helmet on. And I looked and I thought, that's Judge Dredd.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were wondering what would happen if some of the more militarized police force started to dress up as Judge Dredd. Would we actually be able to stop them legally from pretending to be judges? I'm not sure what the rules are, you know.
Good point. So I thought if we start off with a look at Judge Dredd, and first of all, I'd say that you're certainly, Tom, you've got a successful track record so far, and you're approached by a lot of IPs looking to work for you, and you've naturally got to be pretty choosy. And from your perspective, Jason, I know you've got a stable of fantastic brands, and you're equally protective of those. So how did you two get together?
So we were the genesis for us was I kind of got obsessed with this idea of a prison break type experience, because it always seemed quite fascinating to me that it always seems to be a sort of bizarre, macabre sort of fantasy that I think most people have had. I would imagine most people have imagined what it's like to be in prison. And it's no coincidence that, you know, prison escape films like Shawshank are habitually at the top of sort of, you know, best 100 lists. So that was the starting point for me, and we always sort of begin with, you know, what's the core of the story, and what's the core of the narrative, and then we got sort of quite interested in an amalgam with something science fictiony, because the idea of a futuristic prison, glass cages and all the rest of it was really interesting, and then we were introduced to quite fortuitously to some of Jason's team, and it just clicked immediately, and for us it just totally made sense. You know, the Crystal Maze is a beloved British TV show, but when I first met Malcolm Hayworth and Richard O'Brien, who are the creators there, it had a lot of the similar elements to Judge Dredd, weirdly, less sort of social parody, but it had the same humour, the humour that you just sort of alluded to, Charles, and the same sort of British irreverence, and a tongue-in-cheekness to it that we love, and we love to sort of bring that out in our shows. And if you've ever come to the Crystal Maze live experience, you know, like all of our performers, and everything that we do is, you know, I like to think that it's incredibly sort of humoristic. So all of that just seemed to click. And when we first spoke to Jason, you know, like they were really sort of excited by what we were proposing, and the two worlds just seemed to mesh perfectly, and that was kind of it from our side anyway.
Cool. And Jason, from your perspective, I know you've had issues with Hollywood in the past, like, you know, wanting to make Rogue Trooper not blue, for example, and I know there was before you were at Rebellion, there was a dreadful Dredd film, and so what are your thoughts on allowing Dredd, the brand, to become a live experience?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't describe Stallone's take on Dredd as awful. I think it had lots of positive elements. I think it strayed away from the core material as far as many fans were concerned, but I think the mass market quite liked it. And it will forever. I mean, I have a soft spot for Stallone's work, because I absolutely love the fact that he's also a writer and performer, and you have to give the man respect for that. You know, Rocky was brilliant. The first Rambo was really interesting and much misunderstood movie. I think it's an anti-violence movie. So I've got a soft spot for Schwarzenegger and for Stallone, of course. So we have a very kind of protective view of being custodians. So we almost think of ourselves as a museum of content. Needs to be accessible for people. They need to experience it and enjoy it. But we don't sell it to anybody. One of the things that Hollywood likes to do is buy things outright, and we never do that. We'll license things to them, but we get the rights back, and we want to do new things with it. If you go into any Hollywood producer's office, you will see hundreds of scripts on shelves behind them, usually. And you realize they've actually only ever made 10 movies, which is a hell of an achievement to do, but they've probably commissioned 1,000 scripts. Wow. And you think all of that effort and all of those brilliant words just not actually being seen by anybody. So there is a sort of side of Hollywood that kind of hoovers up rights, and doesn't, you know, back in the old days, I guess, didn't really respect writers, to a certain extent performers as well in some ways. You know, it's just a big industry, and it chews up ideas and spits them out. So we've always been very, well, I've been described as difficult to work with, but I take that as a compliment, because what it means, you know, what it literally means is I reject contracts. When somebody sends me a contract to do something, I look at it and I go, is that fair? Does that protect the original creators? Does it protect us? Does it do what we want it to do? Or is it kind of an attempt to hoover up everything? And if it's an attempt to hoover up everything, I just say no. I had one very funny encounter with a very senior Hollywood executive who said, "But this is a standard agreement." And I said, "Well, I have a standard answer for your standard agreement. My standard answer is no." He went, "Nobody ever says no to us, though." And I said, "Well, this is a learning experience for you, so this will be your first time." And it was literally, I mean, I wasn't even arguing over money. I was arguing over principles of what should be done to protect the core creative component of this particular thing, which never went ahead in the end. So, and it's happened more than once. So if anybody recognizes this scenario, it won't be necessarily them, it will be several. And I always think you have to be careful, because a bad film or a bad TV show is really damaging. And I always want to work with the best people I possibly can. You know, we had a fantastic time working with DNA on Dredd and Alex Garland and the team there. And that was fantastic experience. They really understood what we wanted to do with the character, and they got it. Obviously, they put their own creativity in there and their own spins and twists on it, which is what you want to do when you're working with creatives. But they didn't stray away from the core values of the main character. And as you know, we had it written into the contract. Carl was actually very happy. He said he would have not taken the helmet off, even if it hadn't been in the contract. But it was literally written into the contract that we would not see Judge Dredd's face. And lots of people went, but we're paying for a star. It's like, everybody knows it's Carl Urban. There's plenty of pictures of Carl Urban there. It's not going to be a surprise. But Judge Dredd, the character, the man, the faceless law enforcement officer, the whole point is you don't see his upper face, or it's obscured or whatever. Just like, you know, there are other conceits that are impossibly crazy. Superman is not exactly in disguise, is he? Yeah. You know, he takes but it's a shared conceit. Everybody kind of gets the story. Yeah, you can play with it. And, you know, obviously obscuring Dredd's face is a thing that they've played with in the comic books a bit. So I see us as kind of protectors of people's original creative vision as much as we can.
Yeah, fair enough. I think with the the Stallone film, I think it's I think you're right. It's not really true to the brand. It's a different vision. And I did like the ABC warrior they have in it. So you know the big.
Yeah, well, that was a bit of an awkward. It's before my time, but I've seen the paperwork, and it's like, what is an ABC warrior doing in Mega City 1? That's a different franchise.
Yeah.
That's that'd be like suddenly sneaking in Spider-Man into a Superman movie. It's like you know, or even worse, you know. Incredible Hulk into a Superman movie, and it's like, hang on a second, you're crossing the streams. So yeah, there were quite a lot of letters flew backwards and forwards because the design team behind it didn't realize. They thought 2000 AD was one comic.
Oh, okay.
They didn't realize it was an anthology.
Good stuff. So if we move on now to the Judge Dredd Uprising. I thought if one of you could talk us through the experience, the different rooms, and how it will, as a visitor experience, how that will be.
Yeah, sure. So it's what we wanted to create this time around was Judge Dredd Uprising is going to be a mega attraction. So it's going to be multi-leveled, multi-layered team experience based on obviously this satirical and darkly funny world. Essentially you are in Britsit of 2140, and Britsit is the mega city which now sits on top of what was most of Greater London and the southeast. And the beginning of the story is essentially you and your friends, you and your team, you've done various miscreances. You know, some of you might have been banged up for organ legging or body sharking, or maybe just the possession of some umpty candy. You're small time criminals, but in this world you can get banged up for anything. And you're on your way to the slammer. You're on your way to the ISO cubes in an ISO block prison, and it's at that point that you are solicited. You are contacted by Dredd himself, and he enlists you to help him save Britsit, because there's a sort of nefarious plan happening right in our midst. And then you move through sort of quite a wonderful and wild and wacky immersive experience, which is narrative led. So you begin in these ISO cubes, and your first sort of mission is to escape the prison cell that you're in. You then find yourself in the belly of the prison, in this ISO block, and it's in this section that you compete in sort of various games and challenges in order to garner points. So throughout, we've been really sort of interested in gamifying the experience. So throughout, you'll see that it is part immersive theatre, but it's also part promenade theatre. It's part, live action. It's part escape room. It's part live video game, really.
Yeah.
And once you escape from the belly of the prison, you are then sort of taken on a transition, and you end up in future Piccadilly. And future Piccadilly is our envisionment of the Piccadilly Circus of 2140, which has just been wildly exciting to imagine. And of course, the Piccadilly Circus that we all know is now subterranean, right? Because it's under the megacity. So it's this dystopian, like less than salubrious neon sort of nightmare. And it's where you meet all kinds of characters, droids and gangsters and mutants. And this section was supposed to be sort of very open plan and free form. So there's no script almost. There are multiple stories that you can go on, and you can be sort of chatted up by a mutant and maybe go off on a sort of mini adventure. But this section is very sort of deliberately sort of free flow and sort of quite, like traditional sort of Punch Drunk-esque immersive theatre. And then after this middle section, you're then back on the journey of the story. And in the next zone, you actually step outside of Britsit, and you're in the Cursed Earth, where you engage in a laser tag battle in order to sort of support the faction, the chosen faction that you've gone with. And you're then sort of, the finale and the final zone is in London's halls of justice, where the entire experience sort of has its finale and its crescendo, and you find out who's won and lost, and you have the whole denouement of the show. So all in all, we're hoping that it sounds effing mental, which was the first box that we wanted to tick, and that it's in everything that we do, it's true and referential to the world of Dredd, and finally that it's pushing boundaries, that it's giving people more bang for their buck, and demonstrating that we really can push the limits of what people expect from modern entertainment.
So how did you work on the narrative? Did you work closely with 2000 AD on that, or how did that work?
Yes, yeah. So we have worked really closely with all the guys at Rebellion, and what we've been doing is having regular sort of meetings with them, suggesting plot lines, suggesting characters, narratives, stories, and because they're the experts, and because they've been, as Jason said, they've been steeped in this world for decades. They're the best people to talk to, because we've spent across our creative teams, we've spent, you know, hours and hours and hours and hours of time pouring through it, but there's never enough time. And we could never know it as well as, you know, some of the writers and some of the artists who we've had the fortune to sort of speak with. And it's little things, you know, so it's like, you know, we'll come up with a story or a character, and they'll be like, oh, do you remember this character, or do you remember this you know, section of the anthology? And it's like, oh, that's great. And then it gives us the visual, and it gives us, you know, further sort of avenues and rabbit holes to sort of go down. So it's been a hugely enjoyable process.
Fantastic. I should say, I think Jason's, we've lost Jason for a moment. I think he's fallen off his horse, but he'll, hopefully he'll appear shortly. So, Tom, you're developing this attraction, you're doing it in the age of COVID. So how has that impacted the design and the narrative and all this kind of stuff?
So, yeah, and look, you know, it's a question that we've had to ask ourselves and continue to ask ourselves. Look, you know, I joked with a journalist the other day that we'd done this on purpose and it had always been part of our plans. But we are in the fortuitous position that our shows are inherently self-isolating. The reason that we did that was always because we want to put primacy on the immersion. So it seems somewhat incongruous to me that, you know, you have immersive experiences, and we won't say who, whereby, you know, you open up a show and suddenly 2,000 people pour in at the same time. That seems somewhat antithetical, like, to me. Whereas, you know, if you keep shows small, 6 people, for example, and they are entirely by themselves in that story, then that to me is pure immersion, and that's throwing people into the show, and that's what I think is really powerful, because, like, audiences are very discerning. You know, I think modern audiences can even be, you know, somewhat cynical, but the thing I love is you know, is seeing a group of people who come to an immersive show, and at the start, you know, they're a little bit too cool for school, and they're like, oh, we're not really going to like this. And then you see them afterwards, and because they've put their phones down, and because they've stopped pretending to be cool, and because they've just lost themselves in this world, they have a ridiculously good time. And it is this moment of escapism. That's really powerful, and that's why we do this, because you know, you can lose yourself in this world. And I think our model is you know, a great way to do that. Different again from VR, which I think, you know, is, again, it's inherently unsociable to just plug yourself into a machine and not share the experience with those around you. So on the two fronts, I think, you know, we've been really lucky that this is the model that we chose and that we love. And yeah, like the cherry on top is that it does protect the groups, and it is sort of COVID friendly in that sense. And, you know, we were able to reopen the Crystal Mazes at the start of July. So the Crystal Mazes are open, and that's, you know, testament to what we're doing when you know, our other friends and colleagues in the entertainment industry haven't had it so lucky at all. So yeah, we've obviously thought about it, but to my mind, COVID and non-COVID, like, immersive theatre of this type is one of the strong futures for sort of live entertainment. And
what about, I know you've said that you've upped the tech for this Dredd experience as opposed to the Crystal Maze, giving you obviously new opportunities. So can you tell us a bit more about the tech and how that's informed by COVID? So, for example, touch screens are no longer COVID friendly. So.
Yeah, so you know, obviously this is set in the London of 2140, and it is a science fiction experience. So we have had to sort of think a lot more about the technology. I think what we're doing, and not to sort of give too much away, but what we're doing in future Piccadilly, I think people are going to sort of find very interesting. But you know, pressure is a privilege sometimes, and we've had to, because of the science fiction experience, and then you add the complexity of sort of having to think about things like COVID. You're forced to come up with more interesting ways to do things. So a good example, and something that we're going to sort of play with, is one of the things that we decided upon very early was that we weren't going to physically embody Judge Dredd, because it was felt that it would just suffer in comparison to, you know, Carl Urban's take on it.
Yeah.
And Sly Stallone's take on it, and to have someone that looks like Dredd in every single show would also be quite difficult to do. In the same way that not every single maze master at the Crystal Maze is bloody Richard O'Brien, because it would just be ridiculous. So we're playing with all kinds of ways that we're going to depict Dredd, in video content, in holograms, in him speaking to you from the Piccadilly Lights and Piccadilly Circus. So all of that has actually, you know, has meant that ostensibly what was a problem has actually become like this great creative fuel, because we've come up with all these crazy things and all these amazing ways that we can depict Dredd, that perhaps, you know, if we'd gone simplistic and gone, oh, well, let's just, you know, stick an actor in a helmet, then we may not have found that, you know, that those rich sort of, you know, avenues of inquiry.
Do you have any, Dredd is obviously, you know, 30 years of backstory of villains and other judges. Do you have any characters in the narrative aside from Dredd, or is the fact that it's in Brit City, does that mean that you don't have them because they're all in Mega City in the States?
So no, we've toyed with a lot of the villains from the sort of the canon of the comic books, and another sort of well-recognized character is Judge Armitage, who's kind of like the top cop in England, in the UK, and he works closely with Dredd, and he's kind of his inside man over here. And there are sort of enemy and villainous factions that will definitely be known to lovers of the comic books. But our sort of main anti-hero, our main villain, is a new creation. But yeah, I don't want to reveal too much without giving the story away.
Fantastic. And I understand you've got a bar in the experience halfway through. Is that right?
Yes. So part of the sort of future Piccadilly, you know, free form promenade type theatre zone. Part of that was we wanted to sort of create a space that was it's kind of our version of the interval, because we wanted a moment true to sort of traditional theatre, which we actually really like about the interval, because what the interval does is, you know, you blow people away with the end of the first act, and then you drop the curtains and you bring the lights up, and everyone's like, Jesus Christ, and I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And you have this convivial moment of being able to, you know, to talk about what's just happened, and by the time you've, you know, necked a glass of wine, then you're back in it. And so we wanted to have our version of the interval, and then we were like, well, how will Little Lion do an interval? And
Yeah.
so, you know, we had to take it to the nth degree. So in future Piccadilly, if you want to sit at the bar and have a beer and talk to your mate about what's happening, then you can. But if you want to go, you know, like I say, into a robot strip club with a mutant and go on some weird mini adventure, then you can. So that's what we wanted to create. We wanted to create this sort of like mad melting pot of a zone where you can stroll around and talk to all the weird and wonderful characters. Or if you just want to sit there and have, you know, a futuristic pint, then you can, and just, you know, talk to your mates about what's been going on. And I just thought, you know, that I love that zone, and I love what we're doing with it. And I just thought that freedom of experience, you know, like if you're a sort of, you know, a mega fan, or you're someone who's ultra competitive and all you're thinking about is, you know, we've got to get points here, we've got to clock up points, then you're going to run around every nook and cranny looking for Easter eggs and going on additional missions and stories. But if you know, if you're a bit more laissez-faire and you want to just, you know, cruise around and walk around with, you know, a future mojito and just soak it all in, then you can. And I just thought that's just like such a wonderful moment in the show, added to the fact that it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be absolutely beautiful and crazy and you know, like just this like neon nightmare, as I say. I just think it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about visiting when it's open, and I think these projects you do they're so ambitious. They're not pop-ups; they're full attractions, and yeah, I'm really excited for Judge Dredd Uprising. So, in terms of opening, you're looking at when in next year, is it?
We're still looking at sort of spring next year. We've got sort of most things in place. And yeah, we're just looking for then the best date to open, and obviously with everything that's going on.
Okay, I was going to mention to Jason, but it's only going to help that there's a TV series, Mega City 1, coming out. So in terms of visibility of the brand, that's got to help Judge Dredd Uprising. Yeah,
sure. And I let you know, I think the thing that we're finding very interesting, and the space in which we are playing and wish to play further is, you know, the pillars of modern entertainment that are, you know, film, TV, video games, and theatre are coming closer and closer together. And so the playground that you've got in between is a really interesting space to sort of exploit. And I think we're sort of quite nicely in the middle of most of those. And, you know, we made the Crystal Maze Live experience and then co-produced the return of the TV show. And then consequently, the TV show got a reboot. Yeah. So, you know, I thought that intersection between theatre and TV was really interesting. Judge Dredd is, you know, first and foremost a comic book franchise, but it's obviously had, you know, films and now a TV show, you know, coming out soon as well. So that combined with the live experience is all sort of really interesting. And next, you know, we're going to be doing experiences that are or were just, you know, famous Hollywood film franchises, or that were just video games, and that's going to be even more sort of interesting still. As I say, as these sort of pillars come closer together, and as all kinds of owners of intellectual properties realise that creating a prestige live experience like the ones that we build gives you so much more. It gives you so much more than you know, just their traditional sort of revenue streams, and it gives you, you know, a pedigree prestige sort of building that people can see and feel and touch and experience.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, thanks for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. And Jason, thanks too. Yeah, both Tom and Jason are registered on our system. So if you want to send them questions, please drop them a line. And Tom, thanks so much, and we shall speak soon.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll speak soon.
Cheers.